The strange encounter. The stars twinkled brightly in the night sky, casting an eerie glow on the earth below. The air was cool, the kind of chill that could make the hairs on your neck stand up. In the quiet of the forest, deep within the heart of an unknown land, something strange was happening. A ship, not of this world, had just crashed into the ground. Inside the ship, a young alien girl lay unconscious. Her long silver hair spilled across the cold metal floor, and her sharp, pointed ears were barely visible beneath the strands. Her green skin shimmered faintly in the dim light. The moment she opened her eyes, confusion and fear gripped her heart. She was no longer in the familiar surroundings of her planet. She was alone, stranded on Earth, the one place where her people had warned her never to go. The alien girl, whose name was Lyra, quickly pushed herself up, her hands trembling. She gazed around the wreckage of her ship, trying to piece together what had happened. Her heart raced in her chest as she recalled the warning from her elders. If you ever crash on Earth, you will not survive. The humans are predators, and they will feast on you. Her body ached from the crash, but there was no time to rest. She had to escape. Lyra staggered to her feet, her legs weak from the impact, but she pushed forward. Her eyes darted around, taking in her surroundings. The forest was dense, and the tall trees seemed to tower over her, as though they were watching her every move. With every step, Lyra's mind raced. She needed to find shelter, and fast. But where? There was no way to contact her people, no way to fix her ship. Earth was dangerous, and she was alone. Fear gripped her once more. She couldn't let herself be seen. She had to hide before any humans came. But just as she turned to find a hiding spot, a rustling sound echoed from the trees. Her heart skipped a beat, and she froze. Was it a human? Was it the predator she had feared her entire life? Lyra crouched low, her eyes scanning the shadows. Then she saw him. A man, tall and strong, with dark hair and piercing eyes. He walked slowly into the clearing, unaware of her presence. His eyes were focused on the ground, as if deep in thought, and he didn't seem to notice the alien girl hidden just a few feet away. Lyra's heart raced. Could he sense her? Did he know she was there? She held her breath, praying he wouldn't look her way. But as the man walked closer, she caught a glimpse of his face. There was something in his eyes that she couldn't quite understand. His expression wasn't one of fear or hatred. Instead, it was curiosity, maybe even kindness. Could it be possible? Was he different from the other humans? The man stopped right in front of her hiding place. Lyra's body tensed, ready to run. But instead, the man turned his head slightly, and their eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The alien girl felt a chill run down her spine, but it wasn't fear, it was something else. The man's gaze was warm, not cold. His face held no malice, no desire to harm her. He was just ... looking at her. Are you lost? The man asked softly, his voice gentle. Lyra was caught off guard. How did he know? How could he speak her language? He was a human, someone she had been taught to fear her whole life. Yet there was no hostility in his voice, only a hint of concern. She took a cautious step back, not trusting herself to speak. The man stepped closer, still watching her carefully. You're not from here, are you? He asked, his tone calm and non-threatening. Lyra's mind raced. Should she run? Should she hide? She could feel her instincts screaming at her to escape, to get away from this human before it was too late. But something inside her told her that running would be a mistake. She had never met a human before, but this one seemed different. There, was no anger in his eyes, no hunger. The man extended his hand toward her, his fingers outstretched as though offering a gesture of peace. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "I just want to help." The words hung in the air, and for the briefest of moments, Lyra's heart softened. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, but the fear in her mind told her to turn and run, for what felt like an eternity. Lyra stood there, torn between fear and curiosity. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, to escape from the human, but something inside her wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he was telling the truth. Slowly, ever so slowly, she took a hesitant step forward. The man smiled. "It's all right," he said, lowering his hand. "You're safe here." Lyra's heart pounded as she tried to decide what to do next. Could she trust him, or was this just another trick? The alien girl had been warned for her entire life that humans were nothing but monstrous predators who would destroy anything that didn't look like them. But this man was different. He hadn't tried to hurt her. Instead, he seemed to want to help, and, for the first time since crashing on Earth, Lyra felt a tiny flicker of hope. Could this human be the one to show her that not all of her kind's beliefs were true? Could it be possible that some humans weren't the predators they had been made out to be? The tension in the air was thick, and Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was just the beginning of something much larger than her, something that could change everything. And as the man slowly turned and walked back toward his home, he motioned for her to follow. "Come on," he said, "let me get you something to eat." Lyra hesitated for a moment longer, but the kindness in his voice was enough to push her forward. She took a deep breath and followed him into the unknown. The unexpected human Lyra walked cautiously behind the man, her silver hair glimmering faintly in the soft moonlight. The forest seemed darker now, the trees casting long shadows that stretched across the path. She could hear the crunch of leaves underfoot, the occasional rustle of animals in the distance, but there was no other sound more noticeable than her own heartbeat. It raced in her chest, a constant reminder of the fear she couldn't shake off. She was still unsure if this was some kind of trap, but there was a strange feeling in the air, a feeling she couldn't ignore. The man led her through the trees, his steps steady, his back straight. His posture was confident, yet there was no hint of urgency, as if he were used to walking through forests in the dark. Lyra, on the other hand, stumbled occasionally, her alien body still recovering from the crash. She tried to keep up, but each step felt heavier than the last. After a few minutes, they arrived at a small clearing where a humble cabin stood. The windows were dimly lit from within, and there was a thin wisp of smoke rising from the chimney. The cabin was modest but warm, a place that seemed like it belonged to someone who valued peace over extravagance. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. It wasn't the kind of place she had imagined humans living in. The man opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. "After you," he said, his voice inviting but not demanding. Lyra hesitated, but stepped inside. The warmth inside the cabin was a relief. She could feel the heat from a fire crackling in a stone fireplace across the room, filling the space with a soft, golden light. The smell of food cooking lingered in the air, something she hadn't smelled before but found strangely pleasant. Her stomach growled at the unfamiliar scent, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since before the crash. The man placed a small lantern on a nearby table and turned to her, his face softening with a friendly smile. "Sit down," he said, motioning toward the wooden chair at the table. "I'll get you something to eat. You must be hungry." Lyra hesitated. She was still afraid of what might happen if she lowered her guard. But there was something in his eyes that made her feel safe. His kindness was real. She slowly sat down, watching him closely as he moved around the small kitchen. He pulled out a pot from the stove, stirring something in it as he spoke. "My name's Ethan," he said, glancing over his shoulder at her. "I live out here alone. Been here for years, just me and the land." He paused for a moment, then added, "I haven't seen many people out here. Not in a while." Lyra didn't answer right away. She studied him quietly, her mind racing. Ethan, he called himself. But what did that name mean to her? What kind of man was he, truly? And why hadn't he attacked her the moment they met? She had heard so many stories about humans, stories of brutality, of greed, of violence. But this man was nothing like those stories. He seemed peaceful, as Ethan said. A bowl of warm food in front of her. Lyra couldn't help but glance down at the meal. It was strange to her, nothing like the food from her planet. She stared at it for a long moment before cautiously picking up the spoon. It smelled good, though. The scent was rich and savory, like nothing she had ever smelled before. "You don't have to eat if you're not ready," Ethan said, noticing her hesitation. "But I hope you'll at least try. I know it's probably strange for you." Lyra looked up at him. There was no judgment in his voice, just understanding. It made her feel ... something. Maybe she could trust him. Slowly, she scooped some of the food into her mouth, her eyes still locked on Ethan as she chewed. It wasn't bad. In fact, it was better than she had expected. She could feel herself relaxing, just a little. But she couldn't let her guard down completely. Not yet. Ethan sat down across from her, watching her carefully. "I'm guessing you're not from around here," he said, a hint of curiosity in his tone. Lyra put the spoon down and nodded. She felt a pang of homesickness at the thought of her planet, far away in the stars. But she wasn't ready to share her story with him yet. She didn't even know if she could trust him completely. She had been taught to never reveal too much. To a human, they could be dangerous. "I come from a distant place," she said, her voice quiet, almost whispering. "Far from here," Ethan nodded, understanding that she wasn't ready to say more. "I figured as much," he said softly. "It's all right. You don't have to tell me everything. I'm not going to force you." Lyra studied him again, her mind working through the decision she had to make. Could she stay here? Could she trust this human who had shown her nothing but kindness? And if she did trust him, what would that mean for her? Would it be safe? Or would her people find out that she had befriended one of Earth's so-called predators? As she sat in the warmth of the cabin, a new feeling crept into her heart, a feeling she had never expected to experience. It was a feeling of uncertainty, yes, but also hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was more to humanity than the stories she had heard. Could this be the beginning of something different? Something that could change everything for her hand, for both their worlds? She didn't know the answer yet, but she was beginning to think that perhaps it was worth finding out. A glimmer of humanity, the fire crackled softly in the hearth, its warmth spreading through the small cabin. Lyra sat at the table, her silver hair spilling down her back as she stared into the flames. The food in front of her was still warm, but her appetite had faded. She wasn't hungry anymore, not for food, but for understanding, for something she hadn't expected to find here. In the middle of this strange world, Ethan had stepped outside to tend to his garden, giving Lyra a moment of solitude. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The way he had treated her like a person, not a threat. It was all so strange. Humans were supposed to be heartless, cold, and dangerous. But this man was ... different. Lyra's mind raced. She thought back to the elders' warnings, the countless stories about humans and their brutal ways. She had been taught to avoid them, at all costs. Never trust them, never let them get close. But Ethan was showing her a side of humanity that didn't match those stories. It was as though she was seeing a part of their nature that few others had ever witnessed. She stood up slowly, her feet light on the wooden floor as she approached the window. She could see Ethan outside, his back turned as he carefully tended to the plants in the garden. His movements were gentle, patient. The way he treated the earth around him was as though he respected it, like he understood that life was fragile and should be cared for. It was a simple thing, but it meant so much. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the door opening. Ethan stepped inside, wiping his hands on a cloth. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. There was a silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt ... natural, like two beings from very different worlds, trying to understand each other. "I hope you're feeling better," Ethan said as he walked over to the small table. He sat down across from her and smiled. "I'm not sure what you're used to eating, but I did my best." Lyra nodded quietly. "It's good," she said softly. Her voice sounded different than it had before, gentler, as though her usual harsh tone had softened in the presence of this strange human dot. Ethan watched her closely for a moment. His gaze was kind, but there was something unspoken. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said, breaking the silence. "I know you're scared. I can see it. But you don't have to be afraid of me." Lyra's eyes flickered with uncertainty. She wasn't used to someone speaking to her with such honesty, with such understanding. It made her feel vulnerable, something she had spent her entire life avoiding. "But why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why haven't you hurt me? Why haven't you tried to kill me like all the others?" Ethan's expression shifted, his brows furrowing as if he was unsure how to answer. He sat back in his chair, crossing his arms, but his voice remained calm. "I've been where you are. I've felt what you're feeling." He paused for a moment, looking down at the table before meeting her eyes again. Humans can be a lot of things, but I'm not like the ones who would hurt you. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't believe in that." Heart raced. This was not what she had expected to hear. She had imagined that humans were driven by cruelty, by hunger, by a need to dominate and control. Yet, here was one human telling her that he didn't believe in violence. His words felt genuine, like he was speaking from the heart. She searched his face for any sign of deceit, but found none. There was no malice in his eyes, only sincerity. It was a stark contrast to the cold, calculating faces of her peoples. Enemies, the humans who had hunted her kind for so long. "I know it's hard to believe," Ethan continued, his voice softening. "But I've learned over the years that not everything is as simple as it seems. We're all capable of both good and bad, and I think you and we're both just looking for a place to belong. A place where we don't have to be afraid." Lyra blinked, unsure of what to say. Her mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of this. Could it be true? Could humans really be more than what she had been taught? Could Ethan, this one man, truly be different? "I don't know if I can trust you," Lyra said, her voice tinged with doubt. "But I'm willing to try. Just ... don't hurt me." Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. I won't hurt you, Lyra. I promise. His words held a weight that Lyra couldn't ignore. It was the first time she had heard a human speak with such assurance, and she wanted to believe him. The silence between them felt different now, not heavy or awkward, but full of possibility. Lyra couldn't help but wonder if this was the start of something she had never considered before, true connection between two very different worlds. As the night wore on, they sat together, talking quietly. Ethan shared stories of his life, his childhood, and the way he had come to live alone in the forest. Lyra listened, intrigued by his experiences. She had never met anyone who spoke with such calm confidence. In return, she shared a small part of her own story, though she left out the darker details. There was no need to burden him with that yet. For the first time in a long while, Lyra felt something that was foreign to her. Hope. Maybe this human wasn't a predator. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more to this earth than she had ever imagined. And maybe, just maybe, there was a place here for her to be free from fear, free from the past. As she lay down to sleep that night, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that her life was changing in ways she couldn't yet understand, and, for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that change could be good. The truth revealed. The morning light streamed through the small cabin's windows, casting soft rays of gold on the wooden floors. Lyra woke up slowly, the warmth of the bed surrounding her, but it was a warmth that didn't quite erase the fear lingering deep inside her. It had been a long night, longer than she'd imagined it would be. She had fallen asleep to the sound of Ethan's calm breathing, which had helped quiet the turmoil inside her. But even in the peace of the night, her thoughts kept circling back to one question. Why was Ethan being so kind to her? She sat up in the bed, her eyes scanning the room. The simple furnishings, the wooden walls, and the fire crackling quietly in the hearth, it all seemed so normal, so human. It was nothing like the sterile, cold environments she had grown up with. Everything about this place felt unfamiliar, but it also felt safe. But she couldn't forget what had brought her here. The crash, the warning, the danger. Lyra got up and walked to the window, gazing out at the forest beyond the cabin. The trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, the air fresh and crisp. The world outside seemed so different from the one she had known. Ethan's footsteps approached, and she turned to see him enter the room. He had a steaming mug of something in his hand, and his eyes were soft when they met hers. "Good morning," he said, offering her the mug. "It's just some tea, if you want some. I wasn't sure what you'd like, but it might help with the nerves." Lyra took the mug hesitantly. She hadn't really trusted any food or drink on Earth, but Ethan's kindness had started to chip away at her reservations. She sipped the warm liquid slowly, feeling its comforting warmth spread through her. It tasted strange but good, earthy and sweet. Ethan sat down across from her, his gaze steady but patient. There was something he hadn't told her yet, something important, and she could see it in his eyes. "You're wondering why I'm being so kind to you, aren't you?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle. Lyra froze, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't realized how obvious her confusion must have been. But there it was, the question she had been afraid to ask. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why haven't you, hurt me? Why are you helping me?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes shifting slightly, as if contemplating something deep within himself. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his tone lower than before. "The truth is, I've seen what fear can do to people," he said, his voice soft but filled with sincerity. I know what it feels like to be hunted, to be someone's prey. I was once in your shoes, Lyra. Not with aliens, but with something else. Lyra blinked, her curiosity piqued. She leaned forward slightly, trying to make sense of his words. She had known fear all her life, but hearing Ethan speak of it in such a calm way was unsettling. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice still wary. Ethan's gaze grew distant as he looked at the fire in the hearth, his fingers lightly tapping the mug in front of him. "When I was younger, I was part of a group that didn't make the best decisions. We were involved in some things we shouldn't have been. And one day, I found myself being hunted by people who wanted to destroy what I had helped build." Lyra's eyes widened. This was unexpected. Ethan, the man who had shown her kindness, had been on the run, just like she was now. Did they ... Did they try to kill you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan nodded, his face hardening for a moment. "Yes, they would have, if they could have. But I got away. I ran, and I didn't stop. And in those moments, when I thought I was going to die, I saw what I had done to others, what I had made them feel." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "And that's when I realized something important. I never want to make anyone feel that way. No one deserves to feel like prey. No one." Lyra sat in silence, trying to absorb what he had just said. His words struck a chord within her. She had always been taught that humans were cruel, merciless beings. But here was Ethan telling her that he understood what it felt like to be hunted, to be the one with the target on their back. The weight of his words settled on her, heavy and real. "But why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you wait until now?" Ethan's expression softened. "Because I wanted you to trust me first. I didn't want you to think I was just another predator. I wanted you to see me as a person, not a threat." He looked at her with a deep intensity. "I don't know what brought you to Earth, Lyra. I don't know your full story. But I can tell you that I won't hurt you. I want to help you." Lyra felt something inside her shift. There it was, again, the feeling that Ethan was different. That perhaps all humans weren't the monsters she had been led to believe. They were. I don't know if I can trust you fully yet," she said slowly, "but I'm starting to think you might be telling the truth." She looked down at her hands, the uncertainty still bubbling beneath the surface. "It's hard for me to let go of everything I've been taught." Ethan nodded. "I understand. It's not easy. But sometimes we have to let go of the past to see the future, to see what's possible." For the first time since arriving on Earth, Lyra felt a flicker of something new, something unfamiliar. Hope. She didn't know if she could trust this man completely, but for the first time, she wanted to believe him. "I want to learn more about your world," she said quietly, looking up at him. "But I don't know if I can stay here forever." Ethan smiled softly, as if he knew this would take time. "You don't have to stay forever, but while you're here, I promise you'll be safe. You don't have to be afraid." Lyra's heart fluttered at the thought. Maybe, just maybe, Earth wasn't as dangerous as she had been told. Maybe there was a place for her here, after all. The growing bond, the days passed slowly, but for Lyra, they felt strangely peaceful. The constant fear that had gripped her since the crash on Earth had started to dissipate, though it still lingered, faint but persistent, in the back of her mind. Ethan was kind to her, always offering a smile or a gentle word when the tension between them grew too heavy. He had been patient with her in ways she hadn't expected. allowing her to adjust to the strange new world around her at her own pace. She spent her days helping Ethan around the cabin's more tasks. At first, he would show her how to care for the plants in his garden, how to start a fire in the hearth, and how to cook simple meals with the ingredients he had gathered from the forest. In return, she showed him small, alien tricks like how to grow plants more quickly by using a form of energy she had learned to harness on her homeworld. Every evening, as they sat together to share a meal, the conversation flowed more easily. Ethan spoke of his past, of the choices he had made that had led him to this quiet life in the woods. Lyra listened intently, even though there was still much about Earth that she didn't understand. She didn't know why humans fought among themselves or why they were so determined to conquer their own world. She had a lot to learn, but she was beginning to understand that not all humans were the same. One evening, as they sat near the fire, Lyra found herself looking at Ethan in a way she hadn't before. She was beginning to trust him, truly trust him. It was a strange feeling, one she hadn't experienced in a long time. In her past, trust had been a luxury she couldn't afford. But with Ethan, she felt like she was slowly letting go of the fear that had been drilled into her by her people. Ethan looked up from the fire, his eyes meeting hers. "I know it's not easy for you," he said quietly. "Being here, being so far from home. But you're safe here, Lyra. You're not alone." His words were simple, but they carried an unspoken promise. Lyra felt something stir within her, a warmth that wasn't just from the fire. Maybe she wasn't so alone after all. "You've been kind to me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I never thought humans could be like this. I was taught to fear you, to think of you as monsters, but you've shown me that not all of you are like that." Ethan smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I wish I could say all humans were like me," he said, "but I know the truth. There's good and bad in all of us. It's up to us to choose which path to take." Lyra nodded, her thoughts swirling. She had been taught to view humans as nothing but predators, creatures driven by their need for power and control. But here, with Ethan, she was seeing a different side to them, a side she hadn't known existed. Over the next few days, Lyra began to open up more about her past, though she was still careful with her words. She didn't want to share everything, not yet. But there were moments when she felt safe enough to let her guard down. She told Ethan about her homeworld, about the way her people had been driven to conquer and survive. She spoke of the fear she had felt when she was first sent to Earth, the terror that had gripped her heart when she realized she might be the last of her kind. Ethan listened quietly, never interrupting, always offering a comforting presence. And with each story she shared, Lyra felt something shift inside her. The weight of the past, the constant worry that she was alone in the universe, began to lighten. She wasn't the only one who had known fear and loss. Ethan had his own struggles, his own pain. And yet, he had managed to build a life for himself, one of kindness, peace, and compassion. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Lyra turned to him. "Do you ever miss the world you left behind?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said after a moment, "but I think I'm exactly where I need to be. This life, it's quiet, but it's honest, and I find peace in it." Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite name. She had never known peace like this. Back home, her world had been filled with constant struggle. But here, with Ethan, She was starting to understand that peace was something worth striving for. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra found herself growing more comfortable in Ethan's world. She helped him with the daily tasks, learned more about Earth, and started to feel a sense of belonging that she hadn't known in a long time. The fear that had once ruled her every thought had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of trust and understanding. But there was still a part of her that held back, still a part that remembered the warnings, the stories of how humans had hunted her kind. She couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how kind Ethan was, something would eventually change. She didn't know how, but she knew that danger was always lurking just out of sight. And yet, every time she looked at him, she found herself hoping that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as she had been taught to believe. She wanted to believe that Ethan was right, that peace was possible, even between their very different worlds. But the question remained, could she truly trust him? Or was this just another lesson in the harsh reality of survival? For now, though, Lyra chose to believe in the present. She chose to believe in the bond they were building. She chose to trust Ethan, and that, in itself, was something she had never thought possible. The enemy approaches. The days seemed to pass by in a calm, almost rhythmic pattern. Lyra had grown used to the quiet of the forest, the gentle rustling of the leaves, the steady hum of nature that surrounded her. The fear that had once consumed her every thought had been replaced by a quiet peace she never thought possible. Ethan's presence was a constant comfort, his kindness a steady anchor that kept her grounded in a world that was so different from her own. But, as with all things in life, peace never lasts forever. One evening, as they were preparing dinner, a noise broke the stillness of the night, something unfamiliar, something that made Lyra's heart skip a beat. It was the sound of voices, low but growing louder, carried by the wind from the direction of the forest's edge. Ethan froze, his face tightening as he listened. Lyra stood motionless, her senses instantly alert. Her heart thudded loudly in her chest as her mind raced. Was it a human group? Had they found her? "I'll go check," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady. But there was a hint of concern in his eyes. "No," Lyra said quickly, stepping forward. "I'll go with you. I can't stay here and do nothing." Ethan glanced at her, his eyes filled with a mix of understanding and caution. "It's dangerous, Lyra. You don't know what's out there." But Lyra was already moving toward the door. "You're not going alone." Ethan hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "All right, but stay close." They stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against their skin. Lyra's senses were on high alert, every nerve in her body tense. She could hear the voices more clearly now, but they were still too far away to make out any details. Ethan led the way, moving quickly but carefully through the trees. The thick foliage of the forest provided cover, but Lyra could feel her breath quicken with each step. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. The voices grew louder as they neared the clearing. Lyra's heart raced faster, a deep, primal instinct telling her that danger was close. And then, as they reached the edge of the trees, she saw them, two figures standing in the moonlight, talking softly but with an urgency in their words. They were humans, but they weren't like Ethan. Their faces were tense, their bodies coiled with suspicion. Lyra's first instinct was to hide, to retreat into the safety of the shadows, but she couldn't help but watch. She had never seen humans like this before. These weren't the kind of people who would offer kindness. These were the kind of people she had been warned about. Ethan stood still beside her, his hand subtly reaching for the knife strapped to his waist. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her mind working quickly. These humans didn't look like they were here for peace. They looked like they were looking for something or someone. "I think we found her," one of them said, his voice harsh, filled with cold certainty. Lyra's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. Ethan tensed beside her, his grip on the knife tightening. But Lyra placed a hand on his arm, silently urging him to stay calm. They couldn't let them know they were there. The second figure spoke again, his voice low but filled with authority. "She can't be far. She's an alien. We'll get her before she can escape again." Lyra's stomach churned. It was true. They had found her. The humans who had been hunting her kind for so long, those who believed aliens like her were nothing but trophies, had tracked her down. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to go now," but it was too late. One of the figures turned sharply, his eyes scanning the darkened trees. "I think I heard something," he said, his tone suddenly alert. The other man froze, his hand going to the weapon at his side. Lyra's heart hammered in her chest. They had to move. They couldn't let them find them here. If they did, it would be over. Without a word, Ethan grabbed her hand and started pulling her back toward the trees. Lyra stumbled behind him, her mind racing. These humans were dangerous, but Ethan wasn't just going to let them take her. He was going to protect her. They moved quickly, ducking behind trees and staying low, the sound of the men's footsteps growing louder behind them. Lyra could hear their voices, muffled but unmistakable. They were getting closer. "We're not letting her escape again. We've got to bring her back," one of the men shouted. Ethan's pace quickened, pulling Lyra along with him. She could barely keep up, her legs growing weary from the stress of the situation. Her mind was spinning. What did these humans want with her? Why were they hunting her like this? Her breath was ragged, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to push herself harder. But there was something she couldn't ignore, something she hadn't realized until now. They were after her. They had been hunting her, just as her people had warned. And now, no matter how kind Ethan was, she realized the truth. She was still an alien in a world that didn't want her. The ground beneath her feet suddenly gave way, and she fell hard to the earth. Ethan turned quickly, reaching out to steady her, but it was too late. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, too close now. They were trapped. Ethan's voice was firm as he looked down at her. "Lyra, listen to me. We need to fight." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was real. These humans had found her, and they weren't going to let her go. As the footsteps grew nearer, Lyra's mind raced. She had one chance, one moment to make a decision. Would she fight? Would she run? There was no turning back now. The ultimate choice. Lyra's heart hammered in her chest, the pulse of fear echoing through her entire body. The footsteps were closer now, the sound of boots crunching over the dry leaves growing louder with every passing second. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Should she fight? Should she run? But where would she run to? There was nowhere left to hide. The hunters had found her. Ethan crouched beside her, his face etched with determination. His hand was firm on her arm, pulling her up. "Lyra, we have to move. We can't stay here." Lyra nodded, but her mind was clouded with doubt. She had been running from the moment she crash-landed on Earth. She had been taught to fear, to never trust humans, to hide from them at all costs. And now, here she was, caught in a moment where everything she had known, everything she had believed, was being tested. But in Ethan's eyes, she saw something different. He wasn't afraid. He was ready to fight for her, ready to protect her. That alone made her heart race. It was the first time since she'd arrived on Earth that she felt like someone truly cared for her. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about something more. It was about trust. And in that moment, Lyra realized that she wasn't alone. Ethan's voice was steady. "We can't let them take you, Lyra. They'll hurt you. I won't let that happen." The sound of footsteps was nearly deafening now, just moments away. Lyra looked around desperately, trying to figure out where they could go, where they could hide. But there was nowhere left. The forest seemed to close in around them. Ethan's eyes met hers, his expression softening for a brief moment. "We fight together," he said, as if that alone was all they needed. "You've learned enough here to know how to defend yourself. Now's the time." Lyra took a deep breath, her mind flashing through every lesson she'd learned from Ethan. Ways of Earth, the ways of survival. The fear she'd carried with her for so long still held a tight grip on her heart. But beneath that fear, something else stirred a new resolve. She wasn't going to be anyone's prey. Not anymore. "All right," she whispered, her voice steadying. "Let's do this." With one last look at Ethan, she nodded. The weight of the decision hit her all at once. There was no turning back now. The footsteps were so close now, only yards away. Lyra could see the shadows of the men through the trees. She could hear them laughing, talking among themselves as they drew closer to where she and Ethan were hiding. Ethan motioned to her, and they both silently moved behind a thick cluster of trees. The two hunters came into view, their eyes scanning the darkening woods. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Lyra's heart raced in her chest, but she forced herself to calm down. Ethan was beside her, his body tense, ready. She could see the fire in his eyes. He was ready to protect her, no matter what. When the men were just a few feet away, Ethan whispered to her, "On my mark, we strike." Lyra's muscles coiled, her alien instincts kicking in. She had never fought like this before, but in that moment, she knew what had to be done. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about showing the world that she wasn't going down without a fight. "Now," Ethan hissed. The moment the word left his mouth, Ethan sprang forward, moving with a fluidity and precision that Lyra had come to respect. He was faster than the men, more determined. He grabbed the nearest one by the arm and spun him around, delivering a swift strike to his chest. Lyra followed suit, using the training Ethan had taught her. She darted out from behind the tree and caught the other man off guard, using her agility to sweep his legs out from under him. He fell to the ground with a grunt, his eyes wide in surprise. For a moment, everything stood still. The men were on the ground, dazed and confused. But Lyra knew they wouldn't stay down for long. The fight wasn't over yet. Ethan moved quickly, his eyes locked on the man he had taken down. Lyra took a deep breath and stood her ground, her alien energy rising within her, ready for whatever came next. The men scrambled to their feet, their eyes now filled with anger and fear. "You think you can stop us?" One of them sneered, reaching for the weapon at his side. But Lyra was quicker. She moved in a blur, her hand outstretched, and with a burst of energy, she knocked the weapon from his hand. He stumbled back, clearly surprised by her strength. Ethan's voice was steady, but there was an edge of anger in it now. "You're not going to take her," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You'll leave this place now, and you'll forget you ever saw us." The two men looked at each other, their faces filled with disbelief. They hadn't expected to encounter this kind of resistance. They hadn't expected Lyra to fight back not like this. But the fear was still there. Lyra could see it in their eyes. They weren't used to being the ones on the losing side. With one last glance at each other, the men backed away, slowly retreating into the shadows of the forest. "This isn't over," one of them muttered, but they didn't dare take another step closer. As soon as they were gone, Lyra collapsed onto the ground, her breath coming in short, heavy gasps. She was trembling, but it wasn't fear that gripped her anymore, it was a rush of adrenaline. The realization that she had just fought for her life and won. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You did great," he said, his voice filled with pride. Lyra looked up at him, her heart still racing, but a sense of relief flooding through her. She had made the right choice. For the first time since landing on Earth, she had taken control of her fate, and as she sat there, catching her breath in the safety of Ethan's presence, she realized that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Lyra turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan smiled at her, his eyes full of warmth and reassurance. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together." And in that moment, Lyra finally understood. The bond they had formed wasn't just about survival, it was about something deeper. It was about trust, about standing together in the face of fear, and about choosing hope in a world that had taught her to be afraid. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, Lyra felt ready for whatever came next.